Hello and welcome to today's episode of Courage Permission Slip. I am your host, Kia, and today I am so pleased and honored that I get to welcome a wonderful mentor to me, a friend, and someone who is just an all-around amazing person, Nancy Olson, to the show. And before we get started, I want to tell you just a little bit more about her. Nancy is a consultant based in Northern California, focused on leadership development, cross-sector collaboration, and nonprofit success. She also leads professional development programming at Cal Poly Humboldt. Nancy has worked at local, state, national, and international levels and feels very fortunate to have had a broad variety of opportunities to learn and grow, and most importantly, to support others in their personal journeys. Nancy is a passion-driven person, and her top criteria for considering any professional or personal opportunity is, and I love this, Nancy, does this feel right for me? Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thanks so much, Kia. It's so exciting to be here with you.
I'm really, really glad that you are here. And I'm curious to hear, because I wasn't surprised that you shared this, but I would love for you to share why that question of, does this feel right for me? Why that's your top criteria for decision-making.
Right. I have always been a passion-driven person, as I shared in my bio, and I have tried doing things that didn't feel quite right or didn't feel like who I am, and I've kind of failed at them. So there was a point in my life that I tried to be a little more cutthroat in the way I did things, or a little bit more strategic in ways that felt uncomfortable for me. And it was just the inauthenticity of who that was for me. And I use cutthroat kind of tongue in cheek. Some people are a little bit more aggressive, and I can be competitive with the best of them. Don't get me wrong, but I was trying to do it in ways that weren't authentic for me. They weren't who I was, and and I learned a lesson very quickly. I went through that phase for about 2 weeks, and this was maybe a decade ago, and it just it has stuck. It just it was just being my authentic self. I just feel like I'm more successful that way.
Yeah.
And does this feel right for me? Like I said, I'm going back to my passion-driven nature. I want to be doing work that does some good in the world. That's what drives me. Other people have different motivations, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's, I'm kind of this, one person said, you are like a pathological altruist, but which has some negative connotations. But sometimes I get so involved in driving after my altruistic pursuits that it becomes a little consuming. But and then I have to step back and say, okay, is this right? And sometimes it's not just what's right for me, but what's I have to pull back and say what's right for us.
Yeah.
So, but in making career choices and such, it's always I've never applied for a job that I wasn't really excited about. Maybe once or twice, but then that didn't materialize. But I've never taken a job that I wasn't very excited about.
Yeah. And I am interested to dig just a little bit, Nancy. So in those moments where you considered trying on something that wasn't authentic to you, right? As you said, like that more aggressive approach. What was it that drove you to even consider something that wasn't authentic to you?
Because it was what I thought was expected of me. I thought it would make me more successful, perhaps, or more. I don't know. I just, it was. I thought it was expected of me, and that people would perhaps respect me for it. But it's hard to dig back fully into the motivations behind that. But I just remember it was a very short-lived exercise, but I did it,
Yeah.
so I learned something from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That authenticity suits me much better than trying to be something I'm not.
Absolutely. And as you said, the authenticity is the key to your success. I mean, to most people's success, right? I mean, even if you do have those moments of like, oh, I'm winning by not being who I really am, there's going to be a cap to that eventually, right? Like it's going to catch up
Absolutely.
to you eventually. Thank you for
Yeah.
letting me go there, because I was like, my coach mind was like, ooh, ask about
Yeah.
that.
And it's, and the other thing is that I think being inauthentic comes at the cost of personal well-being, personal, uh, gosh, well-being, utilizing your best strengths,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So there is a
Yeah,
cost to being something you're not, or trying to be
absolutely.
something you're not, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I don't think that your natural gifts and talents are able to come through when you're trying to be this whole other person, a whole
for
other type
sure.
of personality, etc. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So, I mean, so that's a courage permission slip of giving yourself, the permission to not be someone that you thought you were supposed to be or what was expected of you. And so with that, I would love to just dive in, Nancy, to, when you think of the word courage, what does it mean to you?
I always go back to the definition of courage as feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Mhm.
I'm sure you've heard that before, and but that's my go-to. When I think of courage, feeling the fear, and if it's the right thing for you to do, if it's something you must do, and even if you don't want to do it, but for whatever reason, but feeling that fear, and doing it anyway. So, I was sharing with you before we started recording. I was feeling, I do a lot of public speaking,
Mhm.
and but even the small little butterflies that I had being on this podcast, I could have called and said, hey Kia, I am not feeling well today. But I girded up my courage and showed up, and I'm
Yes.
because it feels like the right thing for me to do, and
Mhm.
I'm actually very excited to be part of that.
Yes.
But that's just one small example.
Yeah. No,
So
you're
yeah.
totally right. And to your earlier point of, when you're thinking about that assessment of, does this feel right for me? Does this feel right for us? Right? Like I've known you for so long, and you have, and that's why I do really see you as my mentor, because there are things that you have said, perspective that you have shared that still stick with me to this day. I remember
Hmm.
leadership, and I think I told you this during many conversations, but I still remember our very first day of Leadership LA, when you had the lemons on the table and you had us think through what are all the things that had to happen in order for that lemon to get here, right? And it's that when you have an issue or a situation, it's never just one thing. It's never
Hmm.
just one thing that contributes to that. There are so many things that have to
Hmm.
happen to make something possible. And so, like, I just think of all the lessons that you have shared that probably to you were just like, oh, I'm just going to share this, but were so meaningful for me. So I'm really glad
Hmm.
that, you felt those little butterflies and didn't let yourself say, oh, I'm not going to be able to do it today,
Hmm.
because I know that there is light that you have that is going to be so impactful for someone who is listening to our conversation. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Can I say one other thing on that too?
Yeah.
Um, I often, I often will find myself making a really clear decision to do something. This is
Mhm.
what's right for me. This is
Mhm.
what I want to do. This is, the direction I want to head. And midstream, I become terrified of,
Mm.
not necessarily questioning the decision I made, but that, 'cause sometimes that literal paralyzing fear,
Mhm.
and it's the, girding up your
Yeah.
courage again and just continuing on. But, feeling, even if you make a courageous decision,
Mhm.
you may end up having a time or many times throughout the process where you have to engage your courage again.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well,
yeah.
so to that point, because as you were talking, I was thinking about how for me, like sometimes what'll happen is I'll be really scared initially, but then as I start doing it, that fear comes down. But then at some point, I'm going to hit a fork in the road, and then I can feel that fear ratchet up
Yes.
again. And so I have to harness that courage that I was able to wrap myself in to get started in the first place. So you talking
Mhm.
about that, like, midway through, it's like, oh, what's going on here? But on
Yes.
that same token, I have mentioned this on the show before, and so now for people who have heard that in an episode, now you get to hear the person that I heard this from, BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals, like that. Another thing, Nancy, that really stays with me, and I think about that and that teaching from you. And I'm interested to hear, how did giving yourself permission to be courageous, how did that create a shift in your life that has brought you to where you are and what you're doing right now?
Hmm. So a little bit more about what I am doing and what led me here. So I was living in Los Angeles, had a job I loved, was very integrated into the nonprofit and somewhat to the business scene and public sector. So I had a very cross sector role in leadership development and loved what I did. Um, and So here's a bit of courage that I needed to engage. I learned some tough lessons
Mhm.
in the last maybe 2 years that I was in that position.
Yeah.
And um, saying that, like, oh,
Mm. Mm.
what did I do? Uh, and so where I am now, I ended up leaving Los Angeles
Mhm.
and moving someplace. I live in a small town now, rural, remote Northern California, Eureka in Humboldt County. Um, and leaving Los Angeles wasn't necessarily because I was feeling challenged, in that job. It was because I knew I didn't want to be in Los Angeles forever. No offense, my LA friends, because I loved being in LA while I was there and still, love everybody there. But I knew long term that I wanted to be someplace a little quieter. I was just
Mhm.
having this conversation with some folks last night at a fundraiser dinner for our
Mhm.
local chamber of commerce. I wanted to be able to go someplace where I would more frequently run into my neighbors and friends in the grocery store.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
wanted to be someplace that felt a little bit more manageable. I wanted to be someplace that, maybe had a little quieter lifestyle.
Mhm.
But those were decisions that I made over time.
Mhm.
Um, but I remember it was maybe September 2018 that I made the decision to do that.
Mhm.
And I ended up, no, maybe it was earlier than that.
Mhm.
Um, but my decision process was pretty lengthy. Um, and it just really came down to
Yeah.
what's right for me long term.
Mhm.
I ended up taking a risk. I didn't have a job when I came up here. I lived off of savings for a couple
Mhm.
months.
Mhm.
Ended up actually getting the job that I wanted at the university, and I've been able to do some really cool consulting as well. But it was a huge risk, and
Mhm.
people were, leaving something that was, pretty set. I had a
Yeah.
good salary, risking a lot. That's
Yeah.
I had a place to live. I had my dog. I had, I have family up here, so that was helpful. But I think it was just looking at my long term good and
Yeah.
where I wanted to be, and letting go of some things that were, it started not feeling right for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what? Because I remember us talking about the decision after you had made it and what went into this. And what you described reminds me of one of my favorite definitions of courage. And courage looks like and can be so many different things, but one of my favorite definitions of courage, and I'm going to paraphrase, it's from a professor. His name is escaping me right now, but he was saying, he described courage as being, a deliberate choice in the face of painful or fearful circumstances in pursuit of a worthy goal. And, just hearing you be really clear on what you wanted your life experience to be, right? To be able to run into people that you know in the store, and to have a quieter lifestyle, and, a little bit of a slower pace of life. Even though you really loved LA, there's a comfort that comes with living there. You know a lot of people there. You knew what you were doing, what you were walking into every day. But what I hear is that really deliberate choice to lean into the risk, which could or could not work out, right? I mean, you could have had a really completely different experience than what you've had, but the end result of the decision was more important than the fears and the worry that were coming up that led into kind of like your side by side, like pros and cons of, okay, if I make this decision, it could be this or that, right? And so that's what I hear coming through really clearly as you just talk about like what you had to lean into to create that shift for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really true. And one of the ways that I have kind of, because I've had a lot of things happen in my past. I've taken risks, and my move up to Humboldt County was not the only risk I've taken. I've done some other pretty interesting things. Moving to LA was a risk and an adventure, but moving to Sacramento before that, and I lived in the country of Haiti right out of college. Moved there by myself. I had a job with an organization, but and ended up living there for 8 years. But that decision to do that, I'm sure my mother was like, okay, she's going. But and man, did I have some adventures there, good, bad, and ugly. But so it wasn't the first time I've taken risks, but for whatever reason, I have a sense of wanting to do what the most I can with my life. And there are still things I want to do. Whether or not I'll get to do them, I don't know. But I feel really good about the decisions I've made up to now, just because they've been, I've stayed with what's true to me, what's true for me. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So, you talked about the risk of some of your choices, and I'm interested to hear, because fear is such a big component of decisions, not making decisions, et cetera. And I'm wondering if there are any fears that that were either really present for you when you were making some of these decisions, or if there are any fears that are popping up for you right now.
Sure. I think one of the biggest fears that I have always had is financial. I've worked in the nonprofit space most of my career, which can, you can do okay at certain levels, but so I've never gotten rich. So it's always, I'm always a little bit on the edge of financial struggle. And that's a little nerve-wracking. That's kind of probably the biggest fear that comes up for me. And more, some of the fears are, how do I want to spend my time? I'm over 50, well over 50. And, uh, I've got a certain amount of time left. And, how do I want to spend that time? what impact do I want to have? Um, and not that I'm fearful of running out of time. Honestly, I have a pretty interesting relationship with death, and death is part of life.
Yeah.
But how can I do some good while I'm still here? How can I continue to be that authentic force and help people just live their best lives?
Mhm.
So that
Mhm.
sounds so freaking altruistic, and so and so like, oh, just put a crown on me now. But so I feel goofy sometimes saying that kind of thing, but it's where my heart is. It really is
Yeah,
where my heart is, and it's what gives meaning to my life.
sure.
So, and
Sure.
that's it. A meaningful life
Yeah. Well,
is my motivation.
so I mean, you you kind of joke like, oh, give me my crown now. But, in my coaching conversations and certainly conversations that I've had with myself, right, is, so many people, especially when they're in the process of shifting jobs or maybe shifting what they're doing in their job or what they want to focus on. And commonly, I mean, I could go back through all of my notes and, I would put my bottom dollar on the fact that the majority of the people are looking for ways to have meaning, do something meaningful, feel like they're, living some kind of purpose. Or living purposefully. So, I mean, when you said that, I don't think like, oh, I'm getting a cavity at all. Like that is, at many people's core, I feel like that's what drives people is they want to feel like something that they do matters. Um, and that, now I'm getting into kind of like big picture, but you know, what will people say about us after we've left, right? Like if someone was going to write an article, what's our legacy going to be? And as you were talking, I was thinking about this because this came up this has come up with other guests of, worrying. One of the fears is that they won't realize their potential. They won't
Mm.
realize their goal. And I mean, obviously, I've already shared that you have already had an impact on me, but I'm
Mm.
wondering if that ever comes to mind. Not the I'm going to run out of time, but do you ever worry about, will I have made the impact that I want to make?
You know, I I think of the ripple effect
Mm,
of my life and others. I will never know
mhm.
the impact that I've had on other people, whether it's you or, who you go on
Yeah.
and share something that I shared with you, or, somebody's life who I was able to engage with, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's, oh,
Mhm.
did I say something that really hurt somebody that had a ripple
Mm,
effect?
mm,
I'm sure, like every human, I've done that too.
mhm.
But I guess I rest to some degree in knowing that my life has a ripple effect.
Yeah.
I'll share a quick story that my
Yeah.
sister my sister and I talked about. My sister who lives here in Humboldt County, she her husband was a youth minister at the time in Oregon, and I think it was the secretary of that church said something about, oh, there's an opening for a youth pastor in Eureka, California. Just a quick, hey, here's, something that I'm sharing with you.
Mm,
And he and my sister decided to pursue it. They ended up, they've lived here for 30 plus years. They've raised
mm,
their sons here.
mhm.
Their grandkids are growing up here. So that ripple effect of that one person saying one
Mm,
thing that has had a profound effect, not only on her
mm.
family, but now then I moved up here.
Yes.
My kids have both, they both followed me up here. I have
Mhm.
another sister who lives in a nearby town. Her daughter met her husband at, one of my Humboldt County family's weddings.
Mhm.
So it's crazy to think that
Mm.
one little thing that somebody said has had a massive ripple effect on our lives.
Wow.
And when we think about that, um, I think, for me, that has some kind of satisfaction. I'll never
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
the full effect of what
Yeah.
I have done before. Um, but if I can just keep,
Mm.
creating some good, I just want my ripples to be good ones. That's the
Yeah.
big thing.
Right, right. Oh,
So
that story
yeah.
gave me goosebumps a little bit. That's really, I mean, it's simple and still really powerful to think that that one suggestion, that
Yeah.
one like moment of awareness,
Hmm.
how that, what the wake was from that. A really
Absolutely.
good wake. I
Yeah.
love that. So, Nancy, for the fears that you did mention that are coming up for you, how do you manage those?
Yeah. I sometimes I channel my mom and I say this too shall pass,
Mhm.
like, and part of that is rooted and grounded in reminding myself of challenges that I've overcome in the
Mhm.
past as well. I remember one time my son and I, he was really stressing out about something going on in his life. And, we've done this a couple of times, but one time really in particular that he says, like, I don't know if I can do this, Mom. And I said, okay, I want you to tell me all the challenges that you've overcome in your life so far.
Mm.
And he started listing that. And it was so empowering to him and,
Yeah.
and to me as a mom, to say, you know what, we've learned some hard lessons.
Yeah.
And sometimes remembering those hard lessons that we've learned um, gives us, extra courage. It gives
Mhm.
us the knowledge that we can make it through a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that exercise it's so powerful, right? Because, and you and I were talking about this before we got on camera, of like how we're always just moving on to the next thing, right? We're
Hmm.
pushing through, powering through. And, obviously we're learning hard lessons with regard to that right now in terms of like our capacity and burnout and languishing and all of those things. But there is so much power in being able to go back over your wins and your accomplishments and all the challenges that you've overcome to say, okay, like I've done this before, maybe not this exact thing, but I've done this before. I can get through this. There is light at the end of this tunnel. Even if I can't see it right now, it's there. And it's just got to keep marching
Absolutely.
forward. Yeah. Mm, thank you for that. So, where are, looking at your current day, are there any places where you are wanting to give yourself permission to step outside of your comfort zone?
Gosh, an interesting project that I was just awarded is, and I don't know that this is necessarily stepping out of my comfort zone. So in some
Mm,
ways, it's stepping into my comfort zone,
mm,
or something that I'm excited about. But it's daunting nonetheless. So I work full time at the university, and I have, I do consulting on the side. And one of the things I'm nervous about is that I just said yes to a pretty sizable contract. So it's how do I balance that? And how am I wise with my time?
mhm.
And I'm very excited. It's actually creating a leadership program similar to Leadership LA, but up here. And it's something that I wanted to do since even
Mm,
before I came up. And just the stars have aligned to make it happen. So
yeah.
I just said yes to that. But where a lot of my fear comes in is not necessarily in doing the work, it's
Mhm.
in um, really managing my time well
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
making sure I'm giving my best to everything I do,
Mhm.
and also taking care of myself.
Yeah.
That was one of I was burned out when I left LA. I was working
Sure.
12, 15-hour days on the
Mm,
regular
mm,
and
mm.
not sleeping enough.
Yeah.
So how do I continue to
Mm,
be uh, doing good work,
mhm.
in both of these spheres,
Yeah.
and still take care of myself and
Yeah.
maintain, because that was a big commitment I made to myself moving up here was I
Sure.
am not going to go there again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so how do I maintain, a certain level of busyness and my self-care? So
Mm.
that's that's an area where I need to step into. It makes me uneasy to think that,
Mhm.
I could step into burnout again.
Mm. And have you, so I mean, it's fairly recent in terms of you signing this contract. Have you started the process of moving from being in your head about it to putting down on paper, like, okay, here's where I went off track the last time. Here's how I got burned out the last time. Here's what I will do this time as best I can, right? Because the best laid plans, but you know, here's how I will work to prevent burnout and, poor time management this time. Have you gotten that far yet? Or you
Oh,
just are have that awareness?
oh, Coach Kia. Yeah, I have not done that.
Mhm.
But I think that's an excellent idea. I mean, I do have, yeah, okay, all right. I might be integrating that into my next steps as I balance all this. I do have a couple of practices. I
Yeah.
practice meditation, and I have commitments, certain commitments in my world,
Mhm.
related to that, and other things that are that help keep my life balanced. And I have a farm that I go out to get vegetables, and sometimes I'm like,
Mhm.
you know, harvesting my own vegetables or picking up what they've harvested,
Yeah.
and that's a part of my self-care. Get good
Mm.
nutritious food, but also going
Mhm.
out and being in nature.
Mhm.
um so maintaining my commitment to
Yeah.
doing those good things for myself, and maintaining my balance and my pleasure in being
Yes.
alive, um
Yes.
is so critical. I derive a lot of personal satisfaction in the work I do.
Yeah.
But then I also need to, kind of unplug and just have my time
Mhm.
as well. And I
Mhm.
think I'm
Mm.
better at that than I used to be.
Good.
So yeah.
Good. Yeah, they're like passion burnout is a thing, right? People
For
think, oh, if
sure.
I'm just doing what I love, like it's going to be great. And I mean, and I've mentioned this many times on the show. That is a real thing. There have been days where I'm
Yes.
like, nope, I'm done with this. Like this is ridiculous. So it can happen. It can happen. But having those practices, like just remembering, oh, okay, this gives me joy. Oh, this helps me to feel like I can breathe, right? Like just like how we blow through our accomplishments and challenges that we've overcome, we blow through remembering what helps us to feel good, what helps us to feel like we're coming back to ourselves. So I love that you have identified those couple of things that, seemingly seem really like absurdly simple things, but they have huge power and huge impact for you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would also say that sometimes saying no, or not yet, or
Mm,
maybe in a month or two,
mhm.
um, feeling more adept at saying no is
Yeah.
also so key, so key.
Mhm.
And even with my consulting practice, I've gotten to the point that my plate's full,
Yeah.
and unless it's a project that I'm super excited about, okay, let
Mhm.
me introduce you
Mhm.
to somebody else, and not just keep on piling up my plate.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
down to a couple of clients now, and just really focusing in on them. But also, that it's okay to say no, or
Yeah.
to cancel when you've got dinner
Mhm.
plans with somebody, if
Mhm.
you need your time to yourself.
Yes.
And I'm
Yes.
really fortunate to have friends up here who are good with that.
Yeah.
They're not,
Mm.
going to say, "Oh, Nancy's flaky." They'll just say, "Okay,
Mhm.
I respect that for you." And so we
Mhm.
have that mutual
Mhm.
permission
Yes.
to say, "You know what? I need some time for myself."
Yeah.
And I feel really fortunate in that, because that's not always been the case in my life. If you make a
Yeah.
commitment, if you flake on it, um,
Mhm.
there's repercussions, and you'll never get asked out again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
just being able to, and having, like I said, having those friends who understand,
Yeah.
it's really, it's so important as we take care of
Mhm.
ourselves,
Mhm.
and giving
Right.
those people that grace too.
Absolutely. Right. And, and that all boils down to, making sure that we've surrounded ourselves with the right people, right? Like not everyone can be trusted with access to us and to our energy, because then all of those expectations of, oh, well, if I don't do this, then they're going to think I'm selfish. They're going to think I'm flaky. They're not going to ask me out again, right? Like when we have the right people in our sphere, those thoughts might still come up for us, but they don't drive our, decision making that, when we say yes to other people ends up being a no to ourselves.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you calling out the fact that the people that are in your community, in your personal sphere, respect that, and you respect that of them too. That's really important.
Absolutely.
So for the person who is listening to this and listening to our conversation, who has a goal, a dream, a vision, an idea on their heart, but they're not taking steps because the fear of what will happen when they take that risk, or when they, make a different decision, is too big, and it holds them back. What is your guidance for that person so that they can move forward?
I don't know that it's, guidance. It's more questions that I would ask.
Mm-hmm.
It's, having a dialogue with them to help them think through it themselves. What would happen if you don't do this? You have this goal, this BHAG, this big, hairy, audacious goal.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if you don't do it?
Yeah.
Or what would happen if you did it differently? And not in a way that would make them feel less than, but helping them to explore, are there other things that would be equally satisfying, perhaps? Or to motivate them to action as well. I might also ask, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah.
So, ask them why they want to do this. Why is it important to them? What's their long-term objective? What do they want to do? What do they want what's their long-term objective?
Yeah.
So, I think I would just help them explore, ask those questions. For them, for themselves, because it's interesting. I have a friend in my life who, pretty new friend, and talking with her about things, and in our conversations, she has said, Nancy, you need to do what's right for you.
Yeah.
You need to decide what's right for you and do that, and not worry about what other people think. Be clear as to what you want to do and move forward with that. And that gave me so much permission, and so much, just such a broad swath of possibilities, and I get to decide what's right for me. Of course, I have to think of, how it'll impact other people, but I don't have to do what I'm doing because somebody else expects me or wants me to do it.
Right.
When you're at your job, you've got to do what you're told, you're asked to do. But when it comes to the big aspects of your life,
Yeah.
you get to decide.
Yeah.
And there's some privilege in that. I want to, kind of hold back on that. But we have a certain amount of choice in our lives, and especially if we're in a position where we can make that decision. And I do want to say that, like I said, I want to preface that, not everybody has a wide open slate of opportunities.
Right.
But because as we talk about this word, oh, the world is your oyster. Reality is that for most people, there's limitations on what we can and can't do. So
right.
Just want to be realistic about that as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think at the time of recording, inflation is at all-time high, gas prices are going through the roof, and people's money is not going as far. Right. And so instead of saying, oh, look at all these choices I have in front of me, you're like, these are my only choices, right? It's like you're choosing the best of the worst in for many of us, not everyone. There are some people that are really privileged right now, right? But many of us are really choosing from what's the thing that is going to be least painful for me in this moment of strife
Sure.
right now. So yeah, I absolutely recognize that. And we are speaking from a privileged position, even though respectively we have our own struggles too. So I mean, as with everything, like the lemon story, there are layers, right? There are
Absolutely.
multiple pieces to this puzzle, and it's never just one thing. But one last thing before we go, Nancy, where did BHAG come from?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It was from grad school or a book I read or something like that. It's not a Nancy invention, but yeah. So, but can I say something to
Yes.
what we just said before? Yeah. So I wish it was my invention, but but I want to go back to the privilege that we have, and I'm always often reminded of a quote by Viktor Frankl, who is a philosopher and humanitarian who spent part of his life in a Nazi concentration camp. And I have often had a quote of his by my desk at work or something. And it says something like, the greatest human freedom is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about choice, we do have choice about, whoever we are. We have choice as to how we show up in the world. We have choice over our behavior. We have choice over cultivating a positive thought pattern, and habits and things like that. We have choice in many ways, even in very, very difficult circumstances, even in extremely difficult circumstances, and even in the best of circumstances. We can have, live in a mansion and have a fantastic job, and all is right in the world from an external view, but we still have to make that choice to be healthy and mindful and right with ourselves and right with others. And that's something we always have a choice for. Anybody has the opportunity to make that choice.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Especially when you talk about how we have the choice of how we're going to show up in the world, right? Like there are people who seemingly are, choosing to be hard and, contradictory and and it's like, did you just get out of bed and say, I'm going to choose chaos today, right? Or, or you have the choice to, be kind or compassionate, empathetic in any given situation, even if it's hard, right? And oftentimes those are the only things that we can control, right? There's so much that's happening right now that is out of our control. But those, kind of behavioral mindset things are things that we can control. And I'm certainly not saying that it's easy, especially depending on what you're dealing with in terms of any like mental health issues or what have you. Sometimes the choice is, most times choices like that are not easy, but knowing that you do have a choice that you can make in those situations.
Yeah. And making the choice of cultivating the practices that'll, what you put into your mind.
Yes.
Am I gossiping with my friends all the time and putting negative thoughts into my head? Or am I choosing to speak well of others? Am I, intaking information that supports a positive outlook? Or things are hard right now. It's hard to have a positive outlook sometimes, but am I surrounding myself with people and information and experiences that help, kind of shore up
Yeah.
a stronger sense of well-being and a stronger, propensity to be kind, to be empathetic, and to show up as our best selves.
Mm-hmm. You saying that about, which you mentioned earlier, but about choosing who we surround ourselves with. And it reminds me of a talk I gave to some eighth graders who, like, one of their big issues was like all like the clickiness, and not that that goes away as you get older, because but certainly I remember grade school, that being one of the hardest things, right? And I was mentioning a quote from Jim Rohn about how, like, your success is dependent, like 95% is determined by the 95% of the people that you surround yourself with, right? So it's like, are you surrounding yourself with people that are encouraging and will cheer you on and tell you what you need to hear and not always what you want to hear? Or are you surrounding yourself with, like you said, those people that are negative and like, the Eeyore, oh, woe is me, right? Not saying that there's, that you can't not feel great all the time, but are you willing to look at the other side of the coin every now and again? So just remembering that not everyone that you surround yourself with has your best interest in heart, or can really help you to move up, onward, and forward. Absolutely. In the way that you want to. Yeah.
And focusing in on I was just going to say, focusing in on hope rather than fear.
Yes, absolutely. Nancy, I have so enjoyed being on this show with you and having this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
You made it easy, Kia. My butterflies are gone.
So excellent.
So good to spend time with you, my friends.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And so for people who want to get in touch with you, where can they reach out to you and learn more about you?
Probably the best way is to reach out to me via email, and that, or on LinkedIn. And I don't have my LinkedIn address memorized. Is that bad? But my email is Nancy G as in girl, Olson, Olson, and the number 7 @gmail.com. So that's awesome. The best way to reach me.
Awesome. And I will include this information in the show notes so that people can connect with you. Again, Nancy, thank you. It was such an honor to be able to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. Likewise, Kia. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for tuning into this episode of Courage Permission Slip. If you are watching us on YouTube, please make sure that you like this episode and subscribe so that you will be alerted when new episodes are available. And if you have found us on your favorite podcast platform, please rate and review this episode so that other people can find and enjoy this content as well. That's it for today's episode of Courage Permission Slip. Please make sure that you are making your dreams and your goals bigger and more important than your fears. And we will see you on the next episode. Bye.